Herbert's 100 harem. So from what we can tell, this ship is totally sturdy and built from repurposed military equipment of a more primitive but totally robust and well-tested non-axiom-based hardware. One of the Gravia says, as she and 3 others of her kind examine the floating hologram they have of the Dauntless. What none of the 4 Axiom-born women are aware of is that there's a 5th person in the room, drawing to them out of concern of how their organization name translated and the fact that they had been found with a great deal of information on the Dauntless. Yes, it's totally impressive. The sheer consistency of most of the materials suggests that the human cradle world of Earth has a totally powerful military-industrial capacity. No doubt it wouldn't be enough to repel a dedicated invasion, but the null of cruel space would have to be totally dispelled in its entirety first for them to be vulnerable to start with. If we look at things from a totally military standpoint, humans have one of the best defended worlds in the galaxy due to the magic of location, location, location. Another speaks up and Herbert can barely resist rolling his eyes under his visor. The sheer disconnect of the Gravia accent and the things they actually say is outright trying to give him the bends. Not a good thing when his hiding place has him slowly cramping solid to begin with. At least it's not exhausting to be packed in where he is, so there's no time limit due to sweat. Through the tiny devices and the cracks he can watch with building alarm as the walking collections of polygons that these women are bring up an accurate internal cross-section of the Dauntless. Okay, so what we got most likely here is a totally clever system where the engines, power plants, and atmospherics are all connected. They also probably totally run the atmospherics through the hydroponics so that they could totally help out with the air scrubbing. The engines are in 8 separate places. It's totally clever. The fact that they're right is concerning, that they're showing accurate designs when these women were just extrapolating from pictures was worse. Oh my goddess, that would totally work. With the engines near the middle parts of the ship helping with maneuvering and each of the 4 sections being able to close off from each other and almost work as another ship if everything goes totally wrong. A third Gravia explains as she breaks apart the hologram of the Dauntless to show each part in whole. The fact that Herbert can actually pick apart the scary, accurate map and know what each room is. Terrifying. Oh, and there's totally the fact that each area has totally got to have bulkhead doors in order to totally keep the ship from losing its atmosphere from breaking down. The 4th and final Gravia, she's dressed just as pinkishly and looks just as much as a bimbo as the rest, but she's quieter and more thoughtful in behavior. Herbert watches as the women continue and break down not only the Dauntless from a structural standpoint, but they also make extremely accurate guesses to what rooms do what and who's where. The fact that they perfectly pinpoint Admiral Cistern's quarters and offices as well as the bridge means that this group is potentially dangerous despite their clearly harmless intentions. It's a vehicle enthusiast club that study exotic equipment. The Exotic Vehicle Inquiry League had set off alarms when they had stumbled onto some communications on them over online chat rooms and the like. It was stupid, but things had to be investigated. They go on further and further as they break down the weapon emplacements and their firing arcs, the possible acceleration both with and without axiom use, as well as a great number of potential backups, not from plans or information that they've somehow retrieved, but from a knowledge of physics, chemistry, atmospheric sciences, and architecture. Even knowledge of metallurgy and psychology based on an understanding of most apex-class races. It's distressing, especially when they conclude that the Undaunted are no doubt attempting to create some kind of greater purpose for Dauntless-class ships, as they already have not only a method of production, but they know for a fact that more humans are eventually coming on other Dauntless-class ships. The meeting continues before one of the Gravia holds up her hand and looks towards Herbert's direction. His mind races for a moment, but he isn't using axiom beyond causing it to flow in tandem with the rest of the surrounding axiom. She walks over and opens the door to the storage room. She leans in and looks around, giving Herbert a hell of a look at her shifting cleavage as they go from orbs behind a halter top into perky, voluptuous breasts. The collections of lines and three-dimension shapes shifts into a breathtakingly beautiful woman, and then contorts into a nearly flat image. Physical eyes are not sufficient to see a Gravia. As such, the image distorts even as you look at them. She examines the storage closet further, but as Herbert isn't using axiom to hide, merely to hide whatever axiom presence he has, he cannot be detected, and she leans away and shuts the closet again. Herbert doesn't move, and as he expects, she opens the door a moment later before blinking and then closing it properly and walking away. Only after a few more moments does Herbert move to look through the cracks again. The meeting wraps up fairly quickly after that before one of the four brings up a final point. "Girls, you know I love you, but there's something we gotta talk about." The leader states, and the other three start paying attention. It's about our group name. The Exotic Vehicle Inquiry League is a great name and all, but if we start talking to the humans, we might set off some alarms. Just boom, boom and all that. What? Why? Did we do something totally wrong? What's wrong with the name? It's a good name. All you need is to take a few moments and learn the human language of English. Then we look totally horrible, she says, and Herbert watches, slack-jawed under his low-profile armor and stealth suit as all three of the other girls go through a primer on English at just about light speed and going further and further. Oh my goddess, our name anagrams into evil in one of their languages. One of the Gravia, having freshly learned English, states as Herbert stares. The fact that they just learned an entire language in less than a minute? The four women then leave in different states of appearance, discussing what else to call the Exotic Vehicle Inquiry League. A few minutes later, Herbert emerges from the closet while folding up his video blind. A small camera connected to his visor caused it to take the image of whatever the visor takes a picture of, allowing him to have a physical block where there otherwise wouldn't be one. He tucks the blind into a small pouch hanging from his belt and quickly retrieves the three cameras he had placed around the room, saves the video and audio they picked up, and tucks them away as well. He then checks the door and finds no one coming down it at him, and he slips out. He has to duck into a side room as one of the evil Gravia heads back into the room the meeting took place at. He follows and watches through the crack underneath to see her pick something up, and then he vanishes again into the side room before she can come back. She passes him by without noticing, and he follows her out. In moments, he's outside the small block of the larger building. The cluster of rented rooms has a group of women in blood-red robes that conceal their every feature beyond bipedal. However, Herbert can sense that they're using axiom in unusual ways and pegs at least a third of them as aromenta of varying types. He's also about 70 to 75% sure at least 3 of them are slobes, and there are 2 cultists that are clearly shorter people stacked on top of each other. He takes a picture with his visor, and none of them spot him as he scampers out and away. Most of his spy work is something like this. Observe ominous sounding or seeming organization to find out that it's translation or cultural issue, make a report, and move on to the next 20. It was good practice, but if he didn't have a teenager's body, he'd be waking up every day in a full-body Charlie horse. He finally drops the stealth techniques when he climbs onto the balcony of an empty apartment complex and stretches himself out. A touch of axiom to help loosen his muscles, and he nearly sighs in relief. But he still makes no sound. Even when he feels something put its full attention on him and he tenses up, He vanishes from physical sight, and whatever it was that he drew the attention of hits the balcony. He's already on the wall of the neighboring building, tiny spikes between his fingers allowing him to grip into the small seams of the building. He scampers to the side as whatever it is that's attacking him is nothing more than a distortion in the axiom, and only when it moves. Female body, 4 arms, elongated head, and a long tail with a blade. A Zedin. Really big compared to his girls, meaning fully grown and a fucking nightmare and a half in battle. But that means he knows what the weaknesses are. She tries to dive on him a few times, but after 3 of them, he positions himself close to her side. She can see right above herself and has a narrow but powerful cone of vision. But the peripherals are raging hot garbage. That's when one of her secondary arms grabs him around the face, and he slips out of a physical state to escape. Her second grab matches his state, and he gives her a kick to the side of the head for a stunning blow before pulling the pin on a flashbang and then warping away. The disorienting grenade goes off, and he climbs up 2 levels and goes 3 apartments sideways before going completely axiom-less and then dropping a level. Very well done, his stalker says in English, and he throws down a pellet that erupts into a blast of smoke. It obscures him visually, and then there's a heavy coughing. It's not just a smoke bomb, it's a low-dosage gas grenade that you would have to stick a human in for hours for one to even begin to notice the slight anesthesia in it. But it dulls the senses and is so weak it can be safely used in public. Sure, those affected won't be fit to drive, but they won't be hurt. Oh, wow, you're a clever little one, the Zayden says, fading into view. Herbert pauses and stares. He recognizes this Zayden. She turns to face him, still invisible, inaudible, and without a scent or even an axiom presence beyond a slight waver in the local background field. "Hello, sonny boy. Grandma's come to see your training personally," Yzma the huntress says, and Herbert stares without a word. "You've got stalking down fairly well, but how are your trap-making and capture skills?" "Go friendly." Reads across his visor, and he nods before jumping off where he'd taken refuge and landing on the railing next to Yzma. He fades into full visibility even as she smiles at him, and he pulls off first the visor and then the headwear to expose himself to her. "All right, I'd think. I've only been at this for some months now, so I need to make sure I get everything down pat before splitting my focus too far." He answers, leaving his silent persona, even as he places the visor down on his knee to let Yzma be seen fully and clearly by the camera. "Well, I have no complaints about your skill in hiding your axiom presence, although you do have a natural boost in that regard," she notes, and he smirks. "We all have our advantages. I need to pack a knife and you just need to show up," he notes as he gestures to her slowly swaying tail. A touch of body language that tells him she's ready on the mental level to pounce and move quickly. It's not just a weapon, it's also a counterbalance, and effectively a 5th arm in the use of helping her move. A Zedin in motion is as fluid as she is deadly. "Oh, you like the tail?" she asks, even as he pulls out a hoodie from an expanded belt pouch. "I do indeed. If there's one major sticking point of human evolution I disagree with, it's that a lot of primates have prehensile tails and we just have a tailbone we occasionally bruise by sitting down too hard," he says before slipping on the garment and then zipping it up. He then pockets the mask hood he wore and slips the visor onto his shoulder before hopping off the railing. "You're still ready to move, aren't you?" she asks, even as he pulls a pair of loose track pants from the same pouch and slips them on. These ones are tearaways even. If someone tries to grab him by the clothes, then the buttons come undone on the pants and the weak zipper on the hoodie just breaks. But they're both baggy enough to easily hide all of his equipment underneath. "So are you." He turns it back on her and she smiles. He then starts adjusting the gray visor. First it shifts its color and then takes up a bright red and dark red pattern. They're functionally exactly the same, but they look like one of a dozen different sunglasses brands that are moderately popular and could easily be seen on any random civilian. He slips them back on. "Indeed I am, grandson. Now," she begins before rushing away. "Follow me," she calls back to him. "Go." His handler sends on his visor and he nods before leaping after the woman with an axiom-infused jump.